Hey everybody, it's me, Crazyfrankie, and I'd like to welcome you to my Week 7 4 key game picks. Before we get into Week number 7, quick whip around from Week number 6, and obviously a lot went on in Week number 6. I'm going to try to whip this through quickly and all that, but obviously a couple of big stories before I started this video. Obviously a lot of news kept coming in quickly, I want to get to this one quick. Davante Adams is now going to the Jets. The Raiders are going to trade him to the Jets as if I don't know if that's going to make that team any better, given what the performance was on Monday night against the Bills. I really don't know if adding Davante Adams will improve this team, since they already have they already have some wide receivers like Lazard and Mike Williams. I don't know if this makes any sense, or if maybe Davante really was a guy that Aaron Rodgers trusted more than anybody. I don't know. But I don't know if this makes any sense. I mean, obviously that game on Monday night between the Bills and the Jets wasn't exactly a barn burner or an instant classic, given the fact that both teams played terribly. And then, of course, the ref show, a.k.a. throwing a bunch of laundry, a.k.a. flags. That it wasn't that great of a game on Monday night, to be honest with you. But obviously, that's one of the news stories that broke out. Before I will get to another one right now, and everybody knows this already, and you know what I'm going to talk about in just a minute. But obviously, there's a lot of question marks regarding that Jets team and how desperate they are to improve that team, with the Bills beating them and the Bills having a slight stronghold in the AFC East. But I don't know if this will work out for the Jets. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes. And obviously, the other big story, obviously, if you're a fan of the Detroit Lions, and I feel for you guys, you lose your heart and soul of that defense. Aiden Hutchinson to a broken fibula. He's done for the season. And his recovery length is going to take about a year, almost as the same timeline as an ACL, MCL type of injury. Aiden Hutchinson, for the first few years of his career, he's been a dominant defensive player. He really is that heart and soul of that Lions defense. And now without their defensive leader, I don't know who the Lions are going to go to now, especially when you lose that pressure to sack the quarterback, and he's the only guy that's been able to do that. And now you got to wonder now, where do the Lions go forward defensively, even though they beat the living crap out of the Cowboys on Jerry Jones' birthday, and obviously that was poetic justice, to be honest with you. Everybody knew that was sweet revenge for what happened last year in that Week 17 meeting. That clearly was revenge. I mean, as much as the Lions don't want to admit it, that obviously was revenge. That was a revenge game, and it was more than revenge. It was a total blowout in that game. And obviously, Jera going on the radio, he got pissy with the media. The Cowboys are a mess. Let's be real. They're not contenders. They'll be lucky if they even get a wild card spot going forward. When I look at other teams around the NFL, obviously the Ravens, they're starting to get on the groove, but obviously they got, as it kind of predicted, they got into a dogfight with the Commanders, which was nuts. To me, wasn't surprising, given how Daniels of Washington has really come of age, and he's only a rookie in his first season there, and how they really have managed to turn a Commanders team into a possible playoff contender. But give credit to the Ravens, and their defense did step up, and they did put a stop to any sort of comeback that Washington had. And the Ravens now are starting to become a threat, and obviously a lot of that goes to Henry a lot more than so much as Lamar Jackson, and it's really good because it eases off pressure for Lamar Jackson, and it does help a bit. When I look at what else happened around the NFL, obviously the 49ers beating the Seahawks, that was pretty given too, but they just are not in sync. Something is really wrong with that team. In all honesty, is the 49ers, if as good as what they said they were, especially with Brock Purdy and all that game should have been a much bigger blowout. Either Seattle is really a team that just trying to find some sort of identity or something, or really it's really more about the 49ers, and something's really wrong with that team. Hard to say for that 49er team and whether or not they could finally start dominating the NFC West. They're barely clinging on to first place right now in a two-way tie. In a three-way tie, actually, I should say, between them, the Seahawks, and everybody else for that matter. It's a two-way tie, sorry. A lot of things went on in NFL Week 6. Obviously, we want to get started with my picks for Week number 7. So why don't we get to that? All right, let's begin with key game number 1. Obviously, the first place showdown in the NFC North. It is the Detroit Lions versus the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are a slight favorite at 2.5, and expect that number to be 2, maybe 1.5 before kickoff on Sunday. That's no question. This game is a 50-50 toss-up. Who wins this game? Jared Goff of the Lions was 18 of 25, 315 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions in that blowout against the Cowboys. And Sam Darnold, the Vikings were on their bye week. This was his week 5 stats in that game in London against the Jets. He was 14 of 31, 170 yards, no touchdowns, and no interceptions. Keys going into that game. Which playmakers are going to step up in this game? And obviously now with no Aiden Hutchinson at defense, now it brings about a question for that Lions defensive line and whether or not they can rush to get to Sam Darnold in this game. You lose your heart and soul of that defense, and now that really opens up a little problem there in order to try to put pressure on Sam Darnold now. So now you got to wonder if the Vikings will take advantage of it, and you got to wonder if the Vikings defense can hold the Lions. Because the way I see this football game, this is going to be a shootout. There is no question. That Lion offense is no joke. This game is definitely going to go back and forth for sure. It should be a good one in Minnesota on Sunday. But the way I'm looking at it right now, the Lions secondary has to make plays. They got to find a way to get some takeaways on Sam Darnold or force some fumbles. Because the Minnesota Vikings offense has done a fantastic job of scoring points, and their defense is starting to wake up a little bit. I did question them a few weeks ago when they almost let the Packers come back and beat them. But now you're going to wonder, like I said, this is a 50-50 toss-up. This game could go either way because both teams are good. First place is on the line in that division. And I got to wonder who will have the upper hand in this game. It's really tough to say. Both teams are about evenly matched offensively, but it's going to come down to defense. Which defense is going to make the stops? It's hard. I really would like to pick the Lions in this game, but now with Aiden Hutchinson hurt, I have to go the other way. I think not having Hutchinson and not being able to get to Sam Darnold, it's going to be a problem for the Lions. They got to pressure Sam Darnold. Otherwise, they're going to lose this game. I'm picking the Minnesota Vikings here in a very extremely close game. This game will definitely be back and forth for sure. It's all going to depend who makes the biggest mistake in the game and whether or not the other team will take advantage of it. I'm going to pick the Vikings here. I think the Vikings are a little bit will have a little bit of an advantage here, obviously, because now they can exploit what Aiden Hutchinson has dominated. Now with no Hutch, it's going to be a problem for the Lions. I'm picking the Vikings. It could go either way. This game is 50-50. It should be a good one in Minnesota, but I'm going to go with the Vikings here. I think they'll stay undefeated, and the Lions will get their second loss of the season. I'm going to pick the Vikings over the Lions. Key game number 2, a very interesting matchup here. And it should be a good one too. The Houston Texans versus the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are actually a slight favorite at 2.5, and that number probably will get a little bit lower, given the fact that the Texans are no joke. They are a team. This is going to be this is another game I can see this being a dogfight. C.J. Stroud was 20 of 31, 192 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception against the Patriots last week. They blew out the Pats in that one pretty easily. The Packers blew out the Cardinals. Cardinals are not that great of a team. Jordan Love was 22 of 32, 258 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Now this comes at a real test to see what the Packers do against another good team. There is some question marks between that Houston defense, and the secondary. I have a little bit of some question marks here. When I go back to the game against the Bills, they let some big plays happen against Buffalo, and Buffalo somehow made that a football game a couple weeks ago. But when I look at this Packer defense and all that, they really let out a lot of points to a good Viking offense team. Their defense has a little bit of some question marks, giving up some big plays. Now, obviously, they beat up a very dysfunctional Cardinal team, but now I wonder what happens here. Houston, to me, the Texans have more playmakers than the Packers do. And the way I look at this football game, it's going to go back and forth for sure, too. This is going to be a close game, and I can see this game definitely going back and forth. It should be a good one in Green Bay. But for some reason, I'm leaning towards the Texans. I just think, to me, they get Stephon Diggs going in that one here, and they get the running game going. I like the Texans' chance in this game. I think the Texans are offensively, they're a little bit more slightly better than the Packers, but you can't underestimate what Jordan Love has done with that Packer offense. But it's really the defense for both teams, just like when I mentioned in the Lions Vikings. It's going to come down to the takeaways and which team defensively can make some stops. But I'm leaning towards the Texans here. I'm going to pick the Texans here. I just think they have the better playmakers than the Packers do. Stephon Diggs, that you get him going, and I guarantee you, the Texans will barely squeak out a victory against the Packers here. I'm going to take Houston at plus 2.5 for them to beat the Packers here. I'm picking the Texans over the Packers. Key game number 3, the rematch of last year's Super Bowl. The Chiefs versus the 49ers. Believe it or not, the odds makers have the 49ers as a slight favorite in this one here at 1.5. I really think that this game should be more at you pick 'em status because both teams are having some question marks. But obviously, the Chiefs coming off a bye week, they beat up the Saints, but now you got to wonder, again, now can they muster up another butt whipping against the 49ers? Patrick Mahomes in week 5 was 28 of 39, 331 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions in that big victory over the Saints in week 5's Monday night game. Brock Purdy was 18 of 28, 255 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions in that game against Seattle last week. Now, the 49ers are a little bit more rested because they had that Thursday night game, but obviously the Chiefs are coming off a bye week, so this game could go either way. But the 49ers did get some injuries. Obviously, Deebo Samuel was a bit banged up. And you got a lot of question marks now for that 49er offense going into this game, whether or not they can really put up points against Casey's defense. But when I look at this football game here, there's one thing you gotta like about Steve Spagnuolo's defense. They have done a fantastic job, and obviously, they're gonna try to keep the same defensive game plan against the 49ers. And able to stop their offense as they did in the Super Bowl. And this is why I'm picking the Chiefs. I just think, to me, Steve Spagnuolo's defense will have them ready again. The 49ers, they're banged up, even though despite the fact they got a bit more rest going into this game. But I just think that the Chiefs have the better offense. You know Patrick Mahomes can make plays. The 49ers have some issues. And I don't know if Brock Purdy's going to have to play a little bit more better than he did against the Seahawks in order to win this game. I'm picking the Chiefs here at plus 1.5. I think they'll beat the 49ers here I think it's going to be a tight game, but I think the Chiefs pull it out in this one here. I'm going to pick the Chiefs over the 49ers. And finally, key game number 4, one of the Monday night games, it is the Ravens versus the Buccaneers. The Ravens are a 3.5-point favorite, and I think that number will go to 3, maybe 2.5. Lamar Jackson last week against the Commanders was 20 of 26, 323 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Baker Mayfield in an enormous blowout against the Saints. They beat the crap out of them last week. Was 24 of 36, 325 yards, 4 touchdowns. But here's an interesting stat here. 3 interceptions. I'm having a little bit of some question marks right there with Baker Mayfield's decision-making in terms of that passing game. He was picked off 3 times in that game, despite the fact they won on a huge blowout. I think it comes down to the point now, can the Buccaneers stop Derrick Henry in that run? Because that's been really the key for the Ravens and their offense here to ease off the pressure of Lamar Jackson. Even though he's mobile himself, he can make plays himself, but it's really that power running game that Derrick Henry brings to that Ravens team. And I got to wonder about the Bucs if they're able to stop him in the run. Because now I wonder if Baker Mayfield can be a little bit more mistake-free because the interceptions are starting to pile up against Baker Mayfield. They're getting a little bit high than I anticipated. And you got to wonder if the Ravens defense will smell blood in this game, finding a way to get to Baker Mayfield. I think it'll be a good football game, but I think this might be probably a 2017 type of football game here. I think it won't be as high scoring as you'll think as it might be. I know that the Buccaneers can get their offense rolling and all that, but you might get into might get into maybe a small shootout with the Ravens here. Because the Ravens can muster up points with their running game as well as Lamar Jackson making some passing plays and being mobile. I know Baker Mayfield is a bit mobile himself, but I think this game goes back. I think it's going to go back and forth in this one here. But I don't think it'll be like a high-scoring game. I don't think, like I said, it might be a 2017 type of game. Could be a 28-20 type of game. Who do I go with in this game? To me, it boils down to which team makes the better plays and who doesn't turn the ball over. I'm picking the Ravens here at minus 3.5 here. I just think the Ravens have a much better offense than the Bucs do. But you can't always count out Baker Mayfield and what he's able to do to make plays. But I just think the Ravens might be a little bit too much for the Buccaneers in this one here. It's going to be a close game, but I'm leaning towards the Ravens in this one here. I'm going to pick the Ravens at -3.5. I think they'll beat the Bucs barely in this football game. It should be a good one. Should be a good one in Tampa, but I just think that the Ravens are a little bit of a much better team in this one here. I'm going to pick the Ravens over the Bucs. All right, everybody, that wraps up my 4 key game picks for Week 7. Please check the description below if you want all of my Week 7 picks. They're going to be there with the odds and everything. So please make sure you check that out if you want all of my picks and all of that. And last week I was perfect. I did not lose a game last week. So I actually was 14-0 last week. Well, obviously this is going to be a little bit different this week. I'll probably lose a couple of games here and there, but I'm hoping to have another good week in terms of picking football games. And I hope you guys have a good football weekend as well. And take care, everybody.